It's official. Boston College finally names Bill O'Brien their new head coach. It's a new era in Chestnut Hill, and there's reasons for optimism.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black, editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. So, Boston College fans, you got your wish on Friday as Boston College announced finally that Bill O'Brien will be the next head coach of the Boston College Eagles. This ends a week-long process where Blake James, the new athletic director the athletic director, hit a home run. Let's just leave it at that. Jeff Hafley left BC in the lurch, heading to Green Bay and at a very inopportune time. When most coaches that you could have looked at, guys like Manny Diaz, Bob Chesney, there's a few others that were out there as well, already had made their decisions. BC had to basically go out and try to find coaches that would be interested in the job. That's not an easy thing to do because your list of what you could have looked for was small. But I have to say this. What Boston College brought in with Bill O'Brien, I feel is better than any coach that they could have landed earlier in the cycle. And for that, Blake James, congratulations, because you just made yourselves a legend at Boston College. You feed the fans. The fans are so pumped. Why is he a legend? Because a coach like Bill O'Brien is a coach that Boston College never usually lands. BC's always the bridesmaid. I heard that he's been interested in this job many times before, but because BC didn't want to pay for him or because he had other interests, the courtship went quickly. This time, Blake James wasn't going to let him go. Bill O'Brien was interested in the job. He's interested in being in this area. He wants to be a head coach again. He's got a kid who has some medical needs that are done, that can be best served in Boston. His wife is a graduate of Boston College. It was a match made in heaven. All BC had to do was open their wallet, and that's exactly what Blake James did. And I don't think it's just opening the wallet for Bill O'Brien, because if you went in and just paid for him or tried to offer him a salary, he may take the job, but as you all know, there's more to college football than just the head coach's salary. You have to pay your assistants. You have to pay for recruiting, all the, the little things that you do, strength and conditioning, whatever, to make your program shine. You can't just bring in a expensive coach with no support staff and expect him to be successful. Just not going to happen. So BC, we don't know the numbers yet, but based off another move that happened today, is clearly giving up more money for their athletic program to make this football team competitive. That started with the hire of Bill O'Brien, but they aren't done yet. So let's look at the hiring. The process went for about a week. If you've been listening to Locked On BC, I made a joke about this on the Twitter account. Every episode since Hafley's departure, the day after he left, I've been looking at candidates, talking about the process, doing all that stuff. Look at all my pictures other than the one where I talked about potential other candidates. Who's on the cover of each one? Bill O'Brien. Guys, I am going to float my boat a little bit here. I'm going to, give myself a little bit of daps here. I have been all over this with BC and Bill O'Brien for about a week. I knew it was going to be him all along. All the sources I've been talking to, I was surprised they even had to go through the process, but because it's BC, They have to go through the interviews, do all that stuff. To me, that all seemed like a formality to me, because as long as the Eagles were willing to pay for him, Bill O'Brien was going to come to Boston College, and that's what they did. So there was other candidates thrown around. Al Washington was one of the finalists, and I'm glad that he got that chance, because even if he doesn't get that job, Washington now has a higher profile because now he interviewed for a Power 5 program, even as a positional coach. He can use that for leverage for other jobs, so that's good. And hey, maybe he comes back as a defensive coordinator. You had Jeff Monken, who I believe was the other. There was Pete Thamel tweeted. I heard there was 2 finalists. Pete Thamel says there were 3. I've talked to many people and heard 2, but Thamel claims it's 3, and he's the mouthpiece for BC, so he must be right. I heard if that's the case, Jeff Monken of Army was the 3rd one. But those 2, no offense to them, this was Bill O'Brien's job to lose. BC had him in their sights. They wanted a splash hire. They wanted to compete in the ACC finally. They didn't want to go for, a Jeff Hafley who, hadn't coached. They wanted someone with experience. And Bill O'Brien has a ton of experience. He was a head coach for Houston Texans for a while. He was a head coach at Penn State. He's been offensive coordinator at many programs, Alabama. He's going to be there at Ohio State. He was with the Patriots forever. He's got local ties. This guy was a perfect hire. And immediately, everyone's talking about Boston College now. So even though Blake James was put in a position where he had to make a hire when he probably wasn't expecting he would, he did the right thing. He got the right guy. And now, all of a sudden, BC seems like a different beast. And I want to go, before we get into our second segment where I compare O'Brien to Hafley and why I feel more excited about him, there were more news that broke on Sunday night if you were not watching the Super Bowl. BC, earlier in the day, Phil Matus, the head strength and conditioning coordinator for Jeff Hafley, I believe has been named for one of the strength and conditioning. I don't know if he's the head one for the Steelers or not, but he's gone. And I didn't know if it was official yet because it was like one article that put it out. Regardless, strength and conditioning has been an issue at BC. You've been watching those football teams. You see in November, the team just falls apart. So I was hoping that O'Brien would move in a different direction to try to fix that. Just new blood. Nothing, no disrespect to Matus, but you needed something to change there. And not only did he do that, but he pulled a strength and conditioning coach that was just hired at, wait for this, by the Florida Gators. Yeah, BC, the Boston College Eagles, in the year 2023 of our Lord, 2024 of our Lord, pulled a coach that was just hired by the Florida Gators. Now, it could be money. Pete Thamel said, and I quote, Bill O'Brien making a statement with his strength conditioning hire, luring Craig Fitzgerald from Florida. O'Brien has a long relationship with Fitzgerald and will be a key piece moving forward, shows a willingness for BC to spend on staff. So his name is Craig Fitzgerald. One key thing here, he has been with Bill O'Brien forever when he's a head coach. I mean, during Penn State, with the Texans, this is a guy that knows and trusts Bill O'Brien. So I think that's a major piece to it. But BC, if they go in doing what BC does and doesn't pay him, it doesn't matter what his relationship's going to be. He's going to want his money. So BC's paying him too. So there is a piece here going on with Boston College, which makes me so excited to see where the Eagles go with their offensive coordinator search, with their defensive coordinator search, with all of this, because they're going to be, I think, going to be doing a lot more in terms of funding things under Bill O'Brien that they did with the Jeff Hafley, and I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. Now, in our second segment, speaking of Jeff Hafley, we're now into a new era, and I want to explain why the Bill O'Brien hire has me feeling differently than I ever did under Jeff Hafley. I'll get into all of that in just a moment. Now, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to hire quality professionals that are right for your role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than a billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the time and resources to hire. But 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. Now, before you guys go, I want to tell you over at Eagle Insider, I said I've been all over this hire since the beginning. My subscribers know we've added a ton of new subscribers because right now we have 75% off a yearly subscription to Eagle Insider. And I just added a baseball writer that you're not going to want to miss. Skip McCarty knows baseball as well as anyone else. He's going to be there covering it. But I will have coaching hiring news. I'm going to have insight into recruiting, transfer portal updates, everything you want to know for $2.24 a month or 7 cents a day. Get over to Eagle Insider, get access to that 247 deal. After a year, you get Paramount Plus included. That's quite the deal that you're going to get. So make sure to go over to Eagle Insider, check out the deal, make sure you sign up. All right. So the Jeff Hafley era is over. 4 years, 22 and 26. Nice bowl win to end it off. But a lot of frustrations in between. Between watching, basically his history there goes back to, a lot of excitement and dealing with a really difficult situation in 2020 with COVID, to 2021 falling apart, 2022 falling apart, and then 2023 sort of falling apart and then finding some juice and then falling apart at the end. And then a nice end to it. Consistency was never Jeff Hafley's hallmark. If you were to ask me, and someone asked me this the other day, I was unlocked on ACC, and Kenton Gibbs said this. What was one thing that Jeff Hafley did well on the field? He was a nice guy. That was obviously nice, but nice is great until you lose games against at Northern Illinois and, bad teams and barely beat Holy Cross and all that crap, right? But ask yourself this. What did he do well? His defense weren't good. His offense had moments, but they were inconsistent at best and frustrating at worst. Game management? Nah. Recruiting? It was a nice slide down. I guess he learned to work the transfer portal, so he got better there. Was he always good? No. So he never really stood out at any particular thing. Like he never had like Adazio. Adazio was always good with his offensive line. His offensive line, other than like 1 year, was always great, right? Hafley's team always was just kind of You didn't have much of an identity. Like it was a good, it felt like it was a good culture, but we're hearing things like with the Zay Flower stuff now, it's not good. But you feel like he just didn't have, much to add. I feel like Bill O'Brien immediately is going to change that. I think culture-wise, he's going to be tougher, which I think is good. No more coddling players. I think it's just going to be tough, which it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. These are some high ego players to have their, what's chewed out on the sidelines. I think I'm able to handle that. Tough love, though, with wins doesn't really matter. If you're tough and you can win, folks forget. He's got an offensive mind. So there will be a identity offensively. Alabama fans wanted to run him out. a couple years ago when he was averaging. He had an offense that averaged almost 40 points per game. He had Bryce Young win the Heisman, and they lost 2 games in 1 year. The expectations won't be nearly as high at Boston College. If he wins 8 games next year, they're going to build a statue for him. Not really, but you know what I mean? Like, BC fans just want to win again and build, and he's going to be able to do that. Now, the big question marks with him versus Hafley is we saw Hafley jump out right away with some heavy duty recruiting. The recruiting never really panned out, but they were good when it happened. Like CJ Burton, remember that? It was like a top 100 recruit, and they flipped him from Florida and all that stuff. What will Bill O'Brien be able to do? Now, I think the big thing that he's going to be able to do immediately is attract quarterbacks. He's worked with Brady. He's worked with Deshaun Watson. He's worked with Bryce Young. He has the history with working with some pretty big quarterbacks, and even not like great quarterbacks. Like Matt McGloin of Penn State was terrible until he met Bill O'Brien. He brought him right up. So that's going to be big because, a lot of times you get a really good quarterback and a decent team around you, you're going to win games. So you have Thomas Castellanos now, right? You expect him probably to be the quarterback next year. I doubt. It could happen, but maybe Bill O'Brien doesn't like his style of play, and he brings in somebody else that beats out Castellanos during camp. What level player could he get? I'm not sure that's the answer, but as I've always said, my thoughts on Castellanos, honestly, is this will be his last year, and here's why. Either he doesn't improve and he'll get under Bill O'Brien's skin and he'll go in a different direction in the transfer portal, or he gets really good and then I could see him leaving for a bigger program. That's just how I envision things going. And then my gut tells me that next year O'Brien will get a new quarterback. And I think he's such a name that he could bring in a marquee name in the transfer portal. Folks, you're going to have to start donating to Friends of the Heights to help that out. But there's a ton of quarterbacks coming up, especially local guys. And with O'Brien coming from the prep, that he could attract that Jeff Hafley never would have been able to do. Like Blake Herbert, right? Or Blake Hebert, I don't know how to say his name. From Central Catholic. He's committed to Clemson, class of 25. He's a 4-star on some recruiting sites, 3-star on my 247 channel. Very good quarterback, though. I've heard he's interested in BC, but he would have never flipped to Hafley. Like, that never would have happened. Have to imagine now when you have a guy that's got the pedigree that Bill O'Brien does. We haven't seen who his offensive coordinator is going to be yet, which I think will be big. But regardless, these kids are going to see a guy that's, been to the Super Bowl, been on winning teams, all that stuff, worked with legends, and they're going to want to play for him, and especially once he gets that offense going. So I think that's a big advantage that he has. And as a big name, the other piece that I feel that he will be able to do differently, and it kind of links to what we first said, BC's going to give him more money, I think, to get coordinators. He needs a good defensive coordinator. He needs someone who can run his defense. And unfortunately for Sean Duggan, I don't think it's him. I don't think it's Paul Rhodes. The defense wasn't good enough. You need a new face in here to reimagine what BC's defense is and get back to the times where you had, really good linebackers like Luke Kuechly, Kevin Pierre-Louis, Mike McLaughlin, Brian Toll, you name it. Those years that you had Mark Herzlig, you had some of those good defensive lines that were really good too. So I think Bill O'Brien is going to also be able to attract some bigger names in the coaching circuit. So I've heard the thought from some folks that think that BC is not going to be able to attract coaches because it's too late in the game. Well, Kentucky just hired Boise State's offensive coordinator. There's going to be other teams. I don't know what the hell's going on with UCLA. They just lost Chip Kelly to Ohio State to replace Bill O'Brien. But there's going to be coaches that will move. And all it takes is money. So if BC is paying, hopefully, they can get themselves an offensive and defensive coordinator. And maybe for this year, you keep Savon Huggins, Daryl White, Matt Applebaum. They've three of them I feel have earned another year. See if they work. Maybe you say see you later to some of the other coaches. Defensively, they were almost all gone anyways. Vince Ogabase and Abzar Abdul Rahim were both gone. They've moved on to other jobs. So I'm very, very interested to see what Bill O'Brien could bring in on those in that coaching piece. And I'm going to talk about that in our final segment of today's show. You're not going to want to miss that. Super Bowl is over, but get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA teams and players with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. I'm a big Celtics fan. There's some great wagers going on with them. You get your over-under on Jason Tatum or Kristaps Porzingis. You can do over-unders in the game. It's amazing. And the way I love about FanDuel is how easy it is to do that. I had no idea what a parlay was about 3 months ago. Now I use FanDuel. I can do them in a second. They're so easy to use. And when you win, it goes right to your account. You can withdraw it quick, easy payments too. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. And again, excitement all over Boston College Nation with this hire of Bill O'Brien. For the first time in a long time, BC does not feel like a less than in the ACC. I saw, and I forget who put it up. Might have been another podcast or something, but they were ranking the coaches in the ACC, and I don't agree with their rankings, but they went Dabo, Mike Norvell, and then they put Bill O'Brien third. I mean, I was like, hold on a second. I mean, you got Dave Clawson, Jeff Brom. You've got. I mean, he's definitely higher than when Hafley was, but that kind of gives you a feeling of how high this hire makes some folks feel and how relevant it makes BC feel. I mean, this is a hire that puts Boston College in a better footing in the conference. Hopefully will get them more results on the field and make them more relevant and no longer the joke of, oh, you almost beat BC. Oh, that stuff that you hear from like Florida State fans and whatever. It'll be BC is much more respected like they were when they first got into the ACC. That is where the goal should be. And to do that, you got to bring some assistants with you. And as I said in the first segment, you don't have a defensive coordinator. Well, you have Sean Duggan, but I really don't think that that's probably a good idea at this point. You saw the defense last year. They need a fresh start. Offensively, you got Steve Shimko and Rob Jasinski. So Shimko, I think I wouldn't mind if he stayed on the staff as like a quarterback's coach because I feel like he's a good communicator with Castellanos and could help kind of bridge the year from the old system to whatever Bill O'Brien's trying to do with his new offensive coordinator. So he could stay on, but from what I've heard, that it could be just a complete reset for BC. So that means what will BC do? How will Bill O'Brien fit his staff? Will he do what Jeff Hafley did and just stick with guys he knows and trusts? Now, that's popular in football. I mean, look what Bill Belichick did. I mean, Bill Belichick was always like, it's either Josh McDaniels or Bill O'Brien or Matt Patricia. There was always the same guys that kind of came up the tree. But there's coaches that don't. Like Matt LaFleur, who just hired Jeff Hafley, had no relationship with Jeff Hafley before he just hired him. There's pros and cons to both, and you need to kind of balance both. And I don't think Hafley did go outside his comfort zone on some hires. I mean, Daryl Wyatt, I don't think he had any relationship with. But most of his guys were guys he knew from one stop or another. And most of his stops didn't really produce like big names. So my hope with Bill O'Brien is that he goes for some guys that he can build. You look at what Steve Adazio did. Steve Adazio, while he was at BC, I mean, now that they're both of their tenures are closed, Steve Adazio mopped the floor with Hafley in terms of the coaches he brought in. I mean, you go down the list: Don Brown, Phil Troutwain, Ryan Day. Um, I'm blanking on the other names right now, but they had a bunch of guys that ended up being much better than they did when they ended up at BC. I would love to see, and the big thing with that is most of those guys that ended up with Adazio, he didn't know. He just brought them in, and most of them were pretty good. He can do. I would love to see Bill O'Brien do that. You could go in and sure, you could bring in assistants from the Patriots or guys that were positional coaches at Alabama. Maybe there'll be a few that do fill that role, but they're bigger names out there. And one name I put out on the big offensive board on Eagle Insider that I was like, oh man, that would be a fun one, is Brennan Marion from UNLV. Like, if you want to go big, go big. This is a kid that is an up and comer. He's been an offensive coordinator for a couple years now. From Pennsylvania, averaging I think they average 36 points per game. Very well thought of in the coaching world. Who's going to be a head coach before you know it. But if you want to bring some juice, this is a guy that could do it. Put him with Thomas Castellanos, see what you do. The other names like Doug Marrone. That's a picture up on our screen right now on YouTube. I mean, if you're going to go the safe routes, this is a guy that knows O'Brien. He's been around for years. They were together at Alabama a couple years ago. They worked together for a long time. But he's old. Is he exciting? No. Maybe he can be an offensive line coach if you decide to kick out Applebaum, but do you want him to be your offensive coordinator? No. I've gone down the list of guys O'Brien knows, and none of them, the people that he knows, unless you bring in Josh McDaniels, which would be nuts. That's not going to happen. None of the coaches I can see that are available that are O'Brien guys are going to move the needle. But if BC's, again, if they're committed to spend the money, if that's what is going to happen, what Pete Thamel said, which I saw BC Bob, who, if you haven't followed him on Twitter, I don't know who he is, but he seems to know everything, says that's what's going to happen. Then who's BC going to get? Syracuse made their mark. They brought in Elijah Robinson from Texas A&M, one of the best recruiters in the country. Guy I would have pegged to be a defensive coordinator at a big time. I think he was just defensive line at Texas A&M, but they brought him in. Who's going to do that for BC? Because BC needs to make some splash moves. They need to. They've got their head coach, but they need to surround him with some guys that are going to be they're going to light the world on fire on recruiting and get people to go, whoa, the school's paying attention again. So I think that's going to be the next big step. With this new strength and conditioning coach that BC just hired, they're already showing that they're willing to do this. That's a small position, but a very important one. But if they do that at defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we can make some moves on the recruiting trail in the transfer portal. That's going to get things going on NIL. Big picture, it's going to move everything in this program in the right direction. So stay tuned. I have some names I put up, and tomorrow I'll have the defensive coordinators, and I have one name that I put in that no one talked about for defensive coordinator, but I was like, you know what? We could pay him more than he makes as a head coach and bring him back. You'll see if you follow Eagle Insider who that is. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm going to head out. I hope you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl tonight. It was a fun game. I'm kind of tired of the Chiefs winning, but it's fun. Patrick Mahomes is a great player. We'll be back again tomorrow with Mitch. Mitch is going to come on and talk about what are reasonable expectations for Bill O'Brien. We'll talk all about that and any news that breaks because, man, it's been busy. Thank you all for following me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Again, get over to Eagle Insider, become a VIP. It's just $2.24 a month, 7 cents a day to become an insider. We have a huge community of BC fans. I'd love to see you guys all there. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.